Church, I just wanted to thank you all for coming out this morning, and we're going to get started with worship now.
Sometimes we think that our lives are bigger than others. Sometimes we don't understand what's going on around us. But if one mind is the size of a soda can and God is the size of all the oceans, it would be silly for us to say He is only the small amount of water we can scoop into that one little can. God is so much bigger than our time and case lives. So why is it that we think our problems are more important than what God is telling us to do? For God did not send His own Son for us to think that our problems are bigger than the holes that were put in His hands. If we spread our arms out to represent eternity and we got a nail file and scraped off a piece of our fingernail, that would represent our life here on earth. So let's not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will come with its own worries. Now let's stand and worship.
No longer asked to please register attendance and the bulletin tear-off. Tonight we have an administrative committee meeting at 7 in the sanctuary. Tomorrow the youth have devotion at Chick-fil-A at 7, and missions committee and stewardship committee have meetings. Tuesday, UMW Bible study lunch will be served after Bible study. Tuesday is also the last day to get fall festival tickets. Wednesday is a charge conference at Crossgates UMC at 6:30 and fellowship supper at 5:15. You can see your tear-off to make menu reservations or call Judy by 12 on Monday. Thursday, the children will have trick-or-treat booth from 5 to 8 at the News Center. And next Sunday is our fall festival, and there will only be one church service. Take time to read your bulletin for other important information, and take it home with you to keep you reminded of all the great things going on this week. Some joys and concerns that we have are members in the hospital at this time are Toby Gatewood at Brandon Rehab and Walt Pennington is in hospice. Let us settle our mind and open our hearts as we pray for our community, our church, and our work.
Please bow your heads. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the many blessings that you've given to us. Thank you for this opportunity to let me just stand before a crowd and to pray to you, God. And because that may seem like a small deal, but it's just bigger than what most people think it to be. Thank you for everything you've given us from the church, just the ability to get up this morning and come to church. Let us just worship and take it all in for you, God. Thank you for having Youth Sunday and having us come and sing to you, God, and just worship and give our hearts to you. Please be with William as he's about to come speak to us, and let his words just flow throughout our minds and our hearts. And we just love you so much, and again, thank you so much for this glorious day you've given us. We love you. Amen.
I am a lost sheep with no individual identification when compared to those around me. I am immersed in a sea of sheep as far as the eye can see, and as far as I can see, I'm not even who I want to be. Even though I claimed I was just doing me, I was just another culture clone. Dousing myself in cologne, wearing all the coolest clothes. It's amazing how you can be surrounded and still feel alone. I mean, I grew up okay. I had relatively nice things. I had relatively cool friends and would sometimes even go to church on the weekends. But my weakness, my brokenness, was so much more real to me than the God these pastors claim could set this sheep free. Because where was this shepherd? No, where was his flock? No, why haven't any of them tried to meet me in the darkness where I walk? Destiny was not in my dictionary. Value, not in my thesaurus. So of course, I got off course when the only source of support was coming from Jersey Shore. I was the wandering one, the prodigal son. I wanted God, but soaking in sin seemed more fun, not knowing you'll leave me dry as a sponge in the desert sun. So like John Lennon, I imagined this Savior I wanted to see. But like Paul McCartney, I was scared, so I just let it be. Driving around pimping in my yellow submarine, all the while screaming, help! I need somebody. See, I lived in this constant state of curiosity, updated my Facebook views to Christian, but didn't live the way I ought to be. No, I just flirted with the theology. Never could fully commit to dating the doctrine properly, so I just took a step back awkwardly, grabbed the telescope and kept my space, like astronomy. But see, you can't stargaze at the King of Days without seeing the sun rays. So when I heard that the sun raised on the third day, I realized I was a sheep that was never even lost in the first place. No, I was just sitting in my own grave, right where it happened to be my very own rebirth day. See, I was the sheep that put him on a crucifix to fix the death from which I am dismissed. I labored in sin and he took my shift, holes made in his wrists as our spots were switched, and death swung a haymaker that completely missed. Because my God is like Muhammad Ali in the ring, with the grace of a butterfly and the sovereignty of a king. He dodges every cold, fatal sting of death with the very same breath that put life inside my chest. So if you call the gospel trash, Well, then I guess you have grasped the message. Because my God dumpster dives head first into wreckage. He transforms recycled sinners into his very own reflection, so you can call him a garbage man. Because he turned my mess into a message. Because since Genesis, our hearts have been anything but sinless. Despite all of our reports being horrendous, the debt paid by the blood of a son tremendous. So praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Come on, praise the Lord. Because his pursuit after you is relentless.
On a popular avenue in Memphis, Tennessee, a lady sits down in a pew just much like y'all are at right now. It came time for the tithes and offerings, and so she reached into the back of the pew and pulls out an envelope to put her money in. When she opens up the envelope, there was a note written in the back of the envelope. And that note said, "Help me, my name is Leslie Gaddis. He has me in the attic. I'm scared. Please help me." The lady was shaken and terrified. You see, a girl, a teenager named Leslie Gaddis, had gone missing 4 months prior to that date. She was taken from her home in the middle of the night without a struggle and just seemed to have disappeared. And so, since it was 4 months ago, the note was dismissed as a prank and nothing was done of it. The family caught word of this note, and so they asked for the church's attics to be searched, and so they would. They were searched and nothing came up. There was no sign of this girl named Leslie Gaddis. Over the next 2 weeks, more notes started appearing, all very similar message. "Help me, my name is Leslie Gaddis. He has me in the attic. Please call the police. I'm scared. Please help me." It seemed like for the church that someone was playing a cruel prank. And so they rounded up all the youth and the children that could have written this note, and they started to do handwriting analysis on them. And they each got them to write the same things that were written on the note. And after comparing them, nothing really came up. See, but that wasn't the only thing. More strange things started happening in the church. Things started to get moved. Breakfast that was prepared for Sunday morning the night before for 30, all of a sudden, the next morning only 25 were there. Things were being moved around the church and no one could really figure out what was happening. And in fact, the janitors even locked the fridge with a chain and padlock, hoping to stop whoever was stealing the food, and yet the next time the Sunday morning came, there was still food missing from the refrigerator. Finally, 2 janitors decided that's enough. I've had enough. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to come to the bottom of what is happening in the church, the notes and the moving things and the food that's being missing. And so they decided to have a stakeout, a good old-fashioned stakeout. And so they got some food, some supplies, some walkie-talkies, some flashlights, and they said, "We're going to find who's doing this." And so as the night came on, they got to the church, and the church was all locked up, and it was dark, and one hid in the nursery, and one hid down the hall. And they were determined to find out the answer of what was happening in their church. And so the minutes turned to hours, and the hours kept going, and nothing seemed to be turning up. It seemed to be quiet, just like normal. But then around 12 o'clock, approaching the 1 o'clock hour, the janitor that was in the nursery started hearing footsteps. They were coming closer and closer and closer and closer to him. And right as he had passed the nursery door, the janitor saw what was a 6'4", 300-pound man named Earl Stubblefield. You see, Earl Stubblefield had gone into Leslie Gaddis' home before everyone was sleeping and hid, and waited for the house to go quiet. And after the house had gone quiet, and everyone was asleep, he snuck into Leslie Gaddis's room, and he put his hand over her mouth and said, "You're coming with me." He took Leslie Gaddis and put it in the family car, and then drove to Christ United Methodist Church in Memphis. And what he had done is he had taken what was the balcony attic and he had made a false wall and he hid her there for 4 months. Then after he had dropped Leslie off at the church, he drove the car back to her house and he put the keys on the counter and he locked up the door. And he went back to the church. There was no sign of struggle with Leslie Gaddis at all, and that's why when the notes came, no one believed her. See, for 4 months, Leslie Gaddis lived in about a 3-foot-tall crawl space in the balcony of a church. And for 4 months, she could hear people come in every Wednesday and every Sunday. She could hear them worshiping just inches above her head. She could hear the Christmas programs go on with the bells and the choir and the message. She could hear the people conversating after church about where they were going to eat just inches from her head. See, the fact is that Leslie Gaddis was lost in the house of God, literally. On that day that the janitor saw Earl Stubblefield, it was the first time that anyone has made contact or seen Leslie Gaddis in 4 months. So the janitor pops out of the place he was hiding and he said, "Stop." And Earl Stubblefield looked at him, grabbed Leslie by the hand, and started to take off running. The commotion calls the other janitor to come in, and he hit Earl Stubblefield in the head, and Leslie was dropped. And for the first time in 4 months, Leslie was found. For the first time in 4 months, someone other than Earl Stubblefield had seen Leslie. And at that moment, Leslie was free. But prior to that, for 4 months, she was lost in the house of God. Being lost in the house of God, honestly, if we were to be honest with ourselves, is a lot of the times where we might be ourselves. And I'm not talking about physically being lost in the house of God, but emotionally being lost in the house of God. See, we may not be trapped in a crawl space like Leslie was, but we tend to come here every Sunday and Wednesday and maybe Sunday night, or maybe if you have a Bible study on Monday, and we sit in the pews that you're sitting in, we sit in the chair that we sit in for Bible study, and we sing the hymns, and we sing the praises, and we listen to the message, and we walk out, and we look at people, and we say, "Oh, that was a really good message." And then we go on with our day with relatively no change. And I would start to kind of beg a difference on the fact that maybe a lot of us sitting where you are right now are lost in the house of God because we sit here and we think that we're okay, but on the inside we're screaming for help. We're screaming for someone just to notice what is wrong with our life. We are screaming out to people, just hoping that someone could hear us in this last plea call of desperation, that someone would hear us. You start to wonder, I think, when you're sitting there and you're acting okay, if anything is going to get any better. See, the fact is that statistically, more than likely, people are in here, and we go and we greet people on Sunday like we do. How are you doing? Well, I'm doing really good. Can't really complain. But really, there's a whole lot of stuff that we can complain about. How are you doing? Well, I'm doing great. But really, things at home are probably worse than you would really want to admit. Oh, well, how are you doing today? Well, I can't really complain. Doing pretty good. But yet on the inside, you're screaming just for someone to help you because you know that you're lost. You know that there's something in your life that is missing. You know that there's something in you that is craving for something more than what you're getting. You're craving for someone just to notice the hurt that you have. And I think if we were all honest, a lot of us would raise our hand to the fact that we do feel like we're lost in the house of God. Because we come here and we act okay, but we know that we're not. Our verse today comes from Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 4. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to it, and that's where we're going to kind of be. And it says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep, and one of them, you lose one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in open country to go after the lost sheep until he finds it? I'm going to read that one more time so we can kind of grasp it. It says, suppose you have 100 sheep and lose one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? There's been this message has been kind of pulling up inside of me before I even knew that this was going to be a day that I was preached about this idea of someone being lost. And in fact, this verse has been swirling around in my head for a long time. And I started to really think, why is this verse in my head? And it was just for this purpose. You see, the purpose is that this verse brings us so much hope. And this verse brings us so much positivity and so much hope because we can all agree that at some point in our life, and maybe it's right now, that you might feel lost. Well, this verse is saying to you, listen, you might be lost, but there is someone that's looking for you. There is someone out there that is actively pursuing you, relentlessly going after you because you are lost. So that's the first thing that really stuck out to me in this kind of passage is this idea of Jesus being this shepherd. And Jesus being this someone who, whenever we stray off from what he wants us to do, whenever we stray off from the things that we would consider being of God, and we start doing our own thing, and we start saying, well, I've kind of got all this together, I think I'm going to do what I want to do. We start going off the path and we start wondering. I kind of almost imagine Jesus as this shepherd out in this flock of sheep. The sheep is us. Just making sure we're nice. I can just imagine Jesus out in this flock of sheep, and all of a sudden one sheep decides, you know what, I'm going to go over here for a little bit. This grass looks really good over here. I don't want to stay over there. I think this looks really good over here. And so the sheep starts wandering off over to here. Maybe that sheep says, well, the view's better on the mountains over there. So the sheep starts going over there. And all of a sudden you see this sheep that starts wandering from the path. And I can just imagine, if you could with me, this Savior Jesus Christ. And whenever that sheep starts going that way, he starts in a dead sprint taking after us, so he can find us. He starts in a dead sprint going back and trying to find that sheep that was lost. He went after one-on-one that sheep to make sure it can bring back home. Like I said, that sheep is us. Because a lot of the times that's what we do. We get in a lane that we like to stay in. We get in a pew that we like to stay in. We get in a routine that we like to stay in. Where we come in every Sunday morning and we sing and praise and worship and listen. But it's in one ear and out the other. Because what we don't see is that even in coming to church, and even though that you're here today, does not mean that you're not lost. Just because you walk through the door of a church does not necessarily mean that you've got it all together. And in fact is, most time when you walk through the doors of the church, it's because you know that you don't have it together. In whatever way that might be. But where does that leave us? See, we can all admit, and we can probably all even agree upon the fact that we are lost people in some aspects of our life. Maybe some bigger than the others, but we can all probably agree that at some point in our life, we're screaming out for help because we don't really know what to do or where to go from that. So what? What does that even mean? I'll tell you what the interesting part is. What I found is that a person that is lost can never be found unless they want to be found. A person that is lost cannot be found unless they actually desire to be found. And what I mean by that is, you see, in order to be found, you must want to be found. Because if you imagine a search party, and you imagine yourself being stuck in the ground in a hole and no one can see you, and you've got all these people looking for you, and they're going right over, and they can try their very best to look for you, and they can try your very best to discover you. But if you're not crying out for help, and you're not doing something actively to change that, you will stay in that hole, and you continually being lost. Because someone that does not want to be found won't be found. And so that begs the question, what are you? You see, are you sitting there completely content with not being found? You see, some people might be sitting there and even in agreement and saying, hey, listen, I know I don't got it all together. I know that I can't do it all by myself. And maybe it's my marriage that's failing. Maybe it's my friends that are being mean to me. Maybe it's a home life. Maybe it's a child. Maybe it's a sickness. Maybe it's a disease. Whatever it is, I'm stuck here and I'm lost, and I know that, but I don't have any desire whatsoever to become found. We live in a society that is completely okay with complacency. We live in a society that is completely okay with not being okay because that's easier. Because if I actually want to be found and I actually want to not be lost anymore, that means I got to start changing the way that I act, do, and speak. That means that I've actually got to put in effort. Well, right now, I can just kind of do me. How many of us is that them? You see, if I were honest, and if we were all honest here, and I asked you a question, I said, hey, listen, raise your hand if this is true. And I asked you the question, how many people are sitting right where you are right now feeling alone and lost? I think you would be super surprised at how many people would be raising their hand. I think that you would be shocked to see that the person that you're sitting next to feels alone even when you are together with someone. In fact, it's almost the feeling that you can be in a crowd of people but still feel utterly alone because you're lost. You're lost in the sense of you've reached the end of everything that you can do, and now you're just standing with your mouth open wondering, where do I go from here? Where am I supposed to go? Who's supposed to help me? I can't figure it out. And I don't really know anyone that's going to help me. If we were being honest, I think a lot of people will be raising their hands for that. But so what? That's the question that I always ask whenever I'm giving any kind of message is, so what? Because a message that ends with a question and a message that just ends up with an identity, we can identify a problem of being lost. We can identify that problem, but if there's no solution, then you've walked out here with nothing. Because in order to solve a problem, you must have a solution. You can't just identify a problem and expect it to go away. So what? That's the question I always ask. So what? What does that have to do with me? William, I understand that I'm lost and maybe I need some help, and maybe I can even go so far as maybe trying to look for someone that can help me. But so what? I feel alone and no one really cares. I got some news for you. Because even though you might feel like you're alone, and even though you might feel like that the world is against you, and even though you might feel like that you can't recover your marriage, or maybe you feel like that you can't recover from a friendship that has been broken, you can't recover from the addictions that you have, you can't recover from the things that you've said, there's this God out here that cares for you so much. There's this God out here that loves you so much that He is relentlessly pursuing you and just waiting for you to look back and realize that He has been pursuing you all this time. And that the fact is that you're not alone. The fact is that you're not lost. Because He's been right there behind you the entire time. He has been by your side the entire time. The fact is that a lot of the time we don't take the time to look around and see. We don't take the time to look for Him. We don't take the time to actually see that we can be found. All we've got to do is ask. And so that's the challenge. That's the kind of the message of the bulk of this thing, is that you watched the video before, and the fact is that my favorite line from that is that if you call this thing called the gospel trash, well, He literally dives head first into wreckage so He can take my mess and turn it into a message. It's the most beautiful thing to me, because it gives me this hope that even though sometimes I go and I say, listen, I'm fine, but on the inside I'm screaming out, please help me. It's like there's someone sitting right beside me going, hey dude, I'm right here. All you've got to do is ask. It goes back to the very first point that I made, is that you cannot be found unless you want to be found. And if you want to be found, you've got to make some kind of conscious effort to be found. Story about Leslie Gaddis. One of the most amazing parts of that story to me is something that she did. You see, when she was trapped for 4 months in the attic of a church, when she was stuck in that church with no real hope of getting out, she decided, I'm not okay with being here. And so she took the initiative and started writing notes. She took the initiative and started moving stuff around. And what that tells me is that she saw that she was lost in the house of the Lord right now and said, but you know what? I'm going to cry out for someone to see me. I am going to make sure that someone knows that I'm here. And so instead of sitting in a crawl space with her head hung and saying, I'm never going to get out of here, she said, not only am I going to get out of here, but I'm going to make sure that someone knows that I'm here. I'm going to make sure that I get found. How many times do we treat our relationship with Christ like that? With the urgency of, I need help, I am lost, I need to be found, and I'm going to make sure He knows that. How many times do we just sit on the couch and hope that Jesus interjects Himself in our life, and instead of pursuing Him so that we can meet Jesus where He is, so that Jesus can intersect in our life? Because I can promise you this, if you're sitting there today with your head hung, just hoping that Jesus is going to make your problems better, just hoping that God is going to come down and fix all the things that you have in your life, and you're just sitting there waiting, He's not coming. Because in order to be found, you must be seeking to be found. In order to be found, you must be relentlessly pursuing him like he is you. And when you do that, when you start to see that you need to be seeking him, and the light bulb clicks in your head, and you start searching, then all of a sudden, you become found because you will, guaranteed, experience Jesus. It's not an if, but, or. When you are relentlessly pursuing him, and he is relentlessly pursuing you, it is bound to happen. And it will happen. In just a moment, the band is going to kind of come up, and we're going to have this time of just kind of response. I'm not talking about a response of coming down here and maybe accepting Christ, although if that's what you need, please come down here and there will be someone here to talk to you. If it's just the point where you just need to come lay down your face at the altar and say, God, I'm lost and I need you to know I'm lost and I need you to find me, then man, come do that. This next song we're going to sing is called Come to the Altar. And it's a song that is beautifully represented by this idea that we just need to come and open up our hands and want to be found so that Jesus can find us. Just because you're lost does not mean that you can't be found. Because everyone in this room, at some point in their life, has been lost. You're not the only one. And when you start to discover this idea that Jesus wants to find us, then all of a sudden you're going to experience him like you've never experienced him before. Because Jesus is coming headfirst to you relentlessly, pursuing you relentlessly. And all he's waiting you to do is to turn around and offer out a hand. Just a recognition that you need him. I'm going to ask everyone, just when we start singing, just to kind of stand up. And what I just hope is that you take this time, and if it needs to be reflective and you need to sit down, you just need to pray, you need to come up here, you need to talk to someone, go do that. But I just want to join us with one voice in just this worship of just recognizing that we're coming to the altar. Lord, please find us. Y'all stand as we sing.
ushers please come forward for the offering?
This next song we're going to be singing while the plates are passed around. It's titled Scandal of Grace. And it's just talking about, man, how the grace of God just comes down and just covers us. And after the offering is passed around, if you feel so called, you can stand back up and kind of praise us, Lord. And grace, what have you done? Murder for me on that cross. Accuse the absence of wrong. My sin washed away in your blood. Too much to make sense of it all. I know that your love breaks my fall. Scandal of grace, you died in my place, so my soul will live. Oh, to be alive, I give all I have just to know Jesus, there's no one beside you, forever holding my heart. My heart now to sing. The day in this trouble shall come. I know that your strength is enough. The scandal of grace, you died in my place, so my soul will live. Oh, to be alive, I give all I have just to know. There's no one beside, forever holding my heart. Y'all stand with us. Because of you, Jesus is all. Because of you, Jesus is all. Because of your love that my soul will live. It's all because of you, Jesus is all. Because of you, Jesus is all. Because of your love that my soul will live. Oh, to be alive, give all I have just to know Jesus, there's no one beside, forever the hope in my heart. Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know Jesus, there's no one beside you, forever the hope in my heart. Let's sing that one more time. Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know Jesus, there's no one beside you, forever the hope in my heart.
Guys, thanks for worshiping with us this morning. I hope that you love the message I did. I know it hit home for me. Just know that if you're a lost sheep out there, that if you're feeling alone, you're feeling scared, there's nothing that Jesus can't take. God loves you so much that He sent His Son to be your shepherd.